Yeah, I'm fine with that level of mess. I'm not going to pretend to be someone who's neat. Cool. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what this is going to look like at the end. I'm doing this as a little bit of an experiment to get back into video editing for things that aren't just weird little fan edits that no one but myself and close friends are going to see. I have missed doing content on games, but I've kind of come to the decision that streaming is not for me. No! Backspawn! No! Wait, shit! I should have made it so that they hold position. Fuck. Okay. Oh, we just set our dog on fire. Okay. It's a bit much to say the least, just to keep to a schedule like that, whilst also doing highlights on a regular basis, whilst also doing a full-time job. This is going to be a review of 8 different games I found on Steam. Specifically, these are going to be 8 different games that are $15 or less on Steam, and they have all been released somewhere in the last month or so. So we're looking at pretty much the month of August, and I think early September. Put up the release dates of each game as they get mentioned, along with the amount that they cost. So actually, funny thing that we might discuss later for one of the games, this is actually only going to be 7 full reviews, but we will touch on the 8th game a little bit. I'll explain more then. On top of that, this took a long time to edit, so it's no longer actually games released within the last month, because I said that about a month ago. So release dates will be on screen when each game comes up. Just disregard that last bit. Apologies. 5 minutes Until Self-Destruction is a game that will take you much more than 5 minutes to finish, and even past that you may even want to improve your completion time. The premise is that you, a hapless astronaut, are standing on a spaceship that is about to explode, but the doors to the escape pod are locked. Therefore, you must bring down each of the layered security systems that would seal your fate before the timer runs out. This game is devious. At first I played through it with a pen and notebook, thinking I could write down the solutions to each puzzle as I went for the next run, until I figured out that the answers are randomized every time according to the logic of the specific puzzle, and it didn't matter how many variations I wrote down with each run that I did, it would always be quicker to figure it out on the spot. Which honestly makes for a better game. It better encourages you to frantically move about the station and consciously pull back on the anxious voice at the back of your mind that says press everything when things don't work the way you thought they would. I'm purposely limiting my footage to the first couple of rooms because to show any more of this game would be to spoil too much. Half the delay of this game is getting a little bit further and figuring out where a code is used, or where a mysterious switch has opened something, and discovering what lies beyond for you to solve. Just know that the puzzles are well designed and require a level of calculated precision that just intensifies the urgency of the clock when you screw up. It took me a little over an hour to finish the game in one sitting and finally make it off the ship, but the game does encourage you to play again and get a better time. Although, unless you are the score chasing type, I don't think there is much incentive to play this again. I could see someone maybe putting this on when they have a bunch of house guests and challenging each person to see who can escape the ship in turn, but My personal opinion is that I had a blast and it elicited a certain anxiety-tinged joy and elation that I don't get very often. A lot of the time it's just anxiety. And the price feels very reasonable at $3 Australian. I appreciate that the length may vary for people though, depending on how quickly you figure out the puzzles. Even the dev says on their Steam page that finishing the game in one go is possible. It's just very unlikely. Personally, I think unless you can predict the future or just have straight up watched a full playthrough prior, I don't think that would really happen. Ultimately, it's up to you if you consider such a potentially short experience worth it, but to me, it absolutely was. Hellbuilder is exactly what it sounds like. The premise is that you are a condemned soul that for some reason is offered to be saved by the 5 Lords of Hell, if you can create a dominion worthy of each. Otherwise, you'll be made to be the Dark Lord's karaoke partner. Hey, that actually kind of sounds like it'd be fun. Maybe you're the first city planner to come through these parts. Who knows? The important thing here is that each Lord of Hell has their own special units and building requirements, usually centered around a theme. One is all about fire and destruction, another is about using roots and supernatural plants, another is about maximizing torture and suffering, and so on. The aim for each dominion is to make one of every unit, but every unit has their own currency cost, as well as requirements for buildings that need to be nearby. Some will grant bonuses if you place them near the right things, and you'll be severely punished if you get it really wrong. The game uses some helpful UI to calculate any profit or deficit you get from these costs and bonuses. Units must also be gradually unlocked by hitting certain milestones that lift an unholy seal on them. These milestone requirements won't be visible to you until you've unlocked it at least once for that Dominion. Which, look, most of the time it isn't an issue, but sometimes you'll just be unlucky and not have stumbled on what might be the right requirement for that milestone for ages on multiple runs. And yes, I said runs because this is a roguelike. I said roguelike, not roguelike. Yeah, there you go. Every time you run out of currency or find yourself at a dead end, you can transmute the hellscape you've made so far, and in return you'll get an item that applies a bonus to future runs. Depending how large you made the hellscape, rarer items are rewarded. Although, while this is where the main source of progression lies, I think it's also the game's undoing. You see, this is a soul fruit. Soul fruits are more common for larger hells, but it gives you one bit of currency for any unit you place next to a gravewood tree. This is also stackable in the sense that if there are multiple trees next to the unit you put down, you get one currency for every tree it's next to. This even applies when you're putting a tree down as the unit in question. When you couple this with how for most of the Dominions it's pretty quick to unlock gravewood trees, they're inexpensive, and they have no requirements for other units, then suddenly you find yourself making massive forests for basically infinite money. At least until your patience wears thin. I more or less use this strategy in most of the Dominions, in situations where by all other rights, my poor Hell Cityscape planning skills should have meant I would be forced to transmute due to bankruptcy. The Dominion that is themed around using plants and roots interestingly nullifies this strategy, because it increases the cost gradually of putting down gravewood trees, effectively making this strategy inefficient. I was kinda left wishing the rest of the game had something like that. As much as it's my own fault for using it, the money tree forest strategy felt like it cheapened the game a bit, but it was just too tempting to not do. That being said, even once you complete a Dominion, the game reveals bonus challenges called sigils, most of which sound nails hard. No transmutes? Yeah, I'm not smart enough to 100% this game. So the difficulty here is there for the true sadomasochistic achievement hunters out there. To be completely honest, even with my gripes about the balancing, I had a lot of fun. The game took me around 7 hours to complete, although that was because I accidentally restarted my progress on one of the Dominions by pressing start and not continue. Regardless, I think at most that would have erased maybe an hour's worth of progress, and I barely scratched the surface when it came to the game's bonus sigils. When you consider that this game is $7.50 Australian dollars, mind you, on Steam, I would say it's very much worth your time. Dragon has you playing the apprentice mouse witch Margot, as she earns money capturing cute and chubby dragons for the Dragon Sanctuary to eventually afford to go to college. The summary might make it sound like there's a big story here, but that's all there really is to any setup. Where the game shines though is its primary mechanic. To capture these dragons, you must click and drag to create select boxes over these dragons and release it to deal damage until they eventually disappear. But if their fire, thorns, or energy beams make contact with your box, then our adorable little witch is hurt. Get hurt too many times, and that's it for your run. And yes, I said run because this is a roguelike. No, wait, come back. I promise it's not that bad. No, seriously. Any money you receive during a run goes to your college fund, and the game encourages you to play multiple runs, both to continue earning money, but to also experiment with different builds. These builds evolve as a run goes on as you buy spells, upgrades, and temporary potions, while the days get progressively more difficult. Eventually, at day 30, the game literally goes, "Hey, so you made it to the end, do you want to start a new run or see how long you can keep going with your build?" The gameplay itself can be a mixture of frantic click dragging and careful precision. The game applies a multiplier to any gold you pick up with your drag box by how quickly you are getting hits, and some spells also encourage maximizing how many dragons you hit at once. This can lead to very quick swipes of the mouse that, if you're not careful, will cut your run short. Conversely, sometimes when on low health, I found myself waiting for a point I knew for certain I wouldn't get hit, and hoping beyond hope that a heart would drop that I could use to heal. Some builds to me though felt way more OP than others. Like this fire spell paired with this slowing spell that affected any dragons I damaged within my drag box. But then the game does encourage you to try other builds by not only randomizing the shop's contents, but certain cosmetics for Margot and your drag box are locked behind certain achievements that require the use of certain spells and potions. I only have 3 complaints about this. The first is that I didn't feel like these cosmetics were enough motivation for me personally to switch up my preferred build. Yes, the randomization forces you to a certain point, but given the small amount of potions and spells overall, it didn't feel like I needed to wait long before my favourites made an appearance in the store. I didn't even re-roll the store once, because I felt like it just wasn't worth it when I could just hold on to my money for a few more days and wait for the store to come back with new stock. I think some challenge stages where extra gold is offered up in exchange for completing a day with only a specific spell or debuff, with other conditions like a specific enemy group composition or challenge modifier, could have been a good encouragement to try these other spells. Maybe you could add optional modifiers that could be turned on for subsequent runs after hitting day 30 for the first time. That maybe it strikes certain items from the store catalog for the entire run. I don't know, just something to encourage me to mix up my build a bit more, or force me to at the very least. Alternatively, a larger library of spells and potions could also solve this issue, making it hard to just wait out the store with your money until the spell you want appears like it did for me. The second complaint that I have is that even with the gradually increasing difficulties, the game didn't feel like it had much variation. There's maybe 5 or 6 types of enemies, 2 of which feel almost exactly the same, except one is red and the other is green. I think if they were to update the game, my biggest ask would be for more enemy variety, or even just some environmental hazards to spice up the gameplay a little bit more. My third complaint is the music. It's cute and catchy the first couple of runs. Then you realise it's the only song in the entire game. At a certain point, I just muted the music and started playing my own. For what it is, it's good fun. Not necessarily something I would spend an afternoon exclusively focusing on, but definitely a few minutes here or there, or while watching a YouTube video on a second monitor, or listening to a podcast. It's $7.50 AUD on the Steam store, and I'd say it earns that if a cutesy, replayable, low-stakes, mouse-driven roguelike game sounds up your alley. I did genuinely intend to review this one. I like the look of it, and how it seemed inspired by very early 3D rendering. Sure, as much mannequins moving only when you don't look at them is a common horror trope, and there's a reason it's a common horror trope. Xenomatrix is meant to be a game where you play some kind of professor running an experiment where someone's brain has been matched with very old 3D rendering technology. The trailer shows that there's a scepter you'll use to stop, manipulate, and destroy these mannequins, but I didn't see most of that, because I got stuck on the 6th level, which was the start of World 2. At this point, I had just got access to a device that allows me to right-click on a mannequin and it will behave as if I'm looking at it and not move. But lo and behold, around the corner there's a second one, and you can only have one locked in place at a time with the device. But I need to go around this corner to hit a switch, meaning whichever one the device is not locked onto will have free movement. At the time, when I did this puzzle, it felt like no matter what I did, I'd get caught or stuck. You know, if I was in this situation, I wouldn't be too eager to squeeze past that thing either. So I did what made sense to me and decided to go onto the Steam guide to see if I could find a walkthrough, just so I could progress, and
Right.
looking back on my recorded footage, I think I figured out what you need to do here. I think you need to lock the first one in place, somehow bait the second one into this little nook here, and then watch it as you walk backward down the hall, giving you time to hit the lever. But then the walkway is so narrow all around here that I'm not 100% sure that would work either, depending on the timing. Either way, this game was freaking me out and I was stuck, so I don't know what to tell you. I liked what I played. I'm just too much of a dumbass and a scaredy cat to get any further. Yeah, like, the game's $7.50 AUD as well. It has a level editor. People seem to say it's good, judging by the other reviews. If anyone could make a Steam guide, that'd be nice for dumbasses like myself. We'd really appreciate it. Like I said, I intended to review this game, and I still want to play this game, but In Pager, your goal is to follow instructions and board the elevator at the end of every floor. The game has very simple controls. You can walk, interact, and read your pager. Your pager will occasionally buzz when your supervisor provides you with said instructions. The game has a very strong sense of dread throughout, and the art style is gorgeous. Unfortunately, I didn't really find anything else in this game that I liked. The floors are somewhat varied, but most of them rely on you moving an object or pressing a button or just finding the elevator. There is the odd exception where there's a bit more going on, but these felt more like gasps of fresh air. It also doesn't help that there's this tedious minigame between every floor where you see all these floor labels on a sphere that spin you around, and you have to click on a pair to match one shown on the left. Does it matter which one you chose? Not that I could tell. At the time, I wasn't really having any kind of frame of reference to tell whether my choices were making any kind of difference, but after finishing the game, I found patch notes that actually referred to specific floors in sequence. So I assume that it doesn't change what rooms you see at each point. So that minigame is then just pointless. In game, you only get the most vaguest of hints of progression. After a while, I noticed that there were these squares that were slowly filling up, and I'm happy to say that they do indeed seem to signify how close you are to the end of the game. But the game itself feels mostly the same throughout. Whilst playing the game, I wasn't sure if the rooms were just randomized, or whether they were dictated by the floors that you mapped in the minigame, or whether they were all just done in sequence. They just felt the same and a bit boring. None of them really felt like they connected to one another or told a cohesive narrative. The reviews and that tell me that there was somehow a cohesive narrative, so I'm not sure if maybe I was just personally missing something. For most of Pager, I just found myself bored. Sometimes tense, but I would usually be caught by some cheap jump scare and I go right back to being bored. I started off really excited after seeing the trailer and the strong art style, and in the Steam description it said that the devs were inspired by the works of David Lynch. I'm a massive fan of Twin Peaks, and I'm vaguely aware of his other works. I also saw they listed The Stanley Parable, which is an absolute classic for thought-provoking writing and wit. I thought this would be right up my alley, but yeah, no. This game doesn't feel like either of those influences. At one point, I just started looking at the butterflies that are present in almost every floor, and I found a note in one room that talked about someone hunting butterflies, and I started to wonder if it was some kind of metaphor or symbol. But then a few floors later, one of the PC monitors had "randomness is the new oil," and the ending seemed to reinforce that the randomness of the floors was the point all along. Which, if that is the case, is a bit of a shame. I know some people like that sort of thing, but I've always found this idea of random equal funny to be untrue, at least for me personally. Here, it also seemed to be true that randomness does not equal fun. There's a total of 60 rooms apparently, and the game's end screen seemed to show that I had completed 30 of them. It also told me that, hey, you earned credits by completing these rooms, and now you can use them to buy boxes with PNGs and gifts you can stick onto the menu. Isn't that cool? No. And you can also replay rooms that you've already been to get even more credits. Wait, are you saying that there's not enough credits from playing through the rooms I haven't gone through? I finished the game within an hour and a half of boredom, and it costs $14.50 AUD. I do not recommend Pager. S.p.l.i.t, or S.p.l.i.t, is a game where your first task is to connect your computer to a stolen piece of computer kit and copy its files onto your computer. If I say anything more, I will have spoiled the entire experience. The game is incredibly short and it took me just under an hour, but the vibes are impeccable. You'll spend most of the game going through file directories, talking in a chat log, and occasionally typing out the character's thoughts to keep them calm under pressure. It is entirely keyboard driven and controlled entirely through typing out command prompts or words in the environment. You can press Alt on your keyboard to switch up where you're looking between the kit, two monitors, and the window. I'm sure it's nothing. The puzzles will probably feel straightforward to you if you've had any experience coding at all. I have a little experience as I had dabbled here and there when I have had to, and I normally find it tedious. Here though, your toolset and the file directory that you are given are narrow enough in scope that it doesn't feel like it's frustrating. Quick correction here, my dumbass when I wrote this script kind of conflated both coding and the use of a terminal together. They are not the same thing. What I am referring to here is using a terminal. So if you're familiar with, say, using Linux most of the time, or if you've had to do custom commands through a Windows or Mac terminal, this game feels very much like that. I did get stuck for a bit right at the beginning, until I realized I hadn't actually read all of the commands I had access to, and that one of them actually did what I was aiming to do at that point. I can't really say any more than that, but I assure you, it is a well-made game. I only wish it had been longer, although happily, at the end of the credits, it prompts you on whether you want to follow the game developer, And in doing so, I found that in 2023, they actually released an anthology of microgames that had similarly grungy looking sci-fi stories, and going to their website showed that there were even more there. For Split though, I think it'll come down to whether the primary gameplay loop of command prompts and whether you value a tightly written narrative over a more substantial length are worth the $4.50 AUD price tag for you. For me it was, and I will be keeping an eye on what this developer releases next. The only thing I would preface that recommendation with is that there is some pretty upsetting content that might be too much for some. There is a content warning both on its store page and upon starting up the game though, so they have done their due diligence and it makes sense in the context of the setting. But if you are interested in this game, be aware of it. Oscuro Blossom's Glow is a very strange game. You play Celine, a young girl who seems to be able to absorb these glowy orbs from plant life and can then imbue other plants with the orbs, allowing them to bloom with different effects. One day, a creature known as an Oscuro absorbs one of these glowy orbs from a really important flower, and you're tasked with chasing it down and bringing back the flower's glow. The art style and music are gorgeous. It feels like running through a well-illustrated picture book. All of the puzzle elements are modelled after different plants, fungi, bugs, and insects, which really reinforces the overall vibe of the game. Where the game falls down though, annoyingly like Pager, is its gameplay. The puzzles overall are pretty clever. It starts basic early on, but you soon come across different plants and puzzle elements that really liven things up. The issue though is that it's a bit janky to play through. Celine herself feels very stiff to control and has zero momentum on her own, which takes a bit of getting used to. Her movement feels very slow at first, and her jump isn't very big. Couple this with the fact that there were a few times I seem to fall through moving platforms, and that there is literally no coyote time like there is in most platformers, it becomes a recipe for frustration. Sometimes it is absolutely nuts what this game asks you to do as well. Take this section for example. The idea here is that you are using the backs of these beetles to bounce along a corridor where the plant life on the floor will kill you. So far, so simple. Then you meet back up with them in this large open area where they are all flying around a hill. This then means that the distance between each beetle feels inconsistent as they go up or down in their descent. This then translates into a really frustrating cycle of bounce, miss, die, and repeat. I know there's meant to be a collectible if you make it all the way to the left, but at a certain point I just got sick of trying and decided I would just focus on reaching the main path down a hole in the middle, but even that was tricky. Or take this other section, where you have to time your movements quickly to keep within the light. And some sections require you to memorize where certain hazards are to avoid instant death. Issues like this also have me wondering, who is this for? The art style, story, choice of protagonist, and the game's very strong hand-holding grip at certain points made me think this was a game aimed at a younger audience. But then you have these frustrating sections that I don't think most adults would have the patience to sit through, let alone kids. Even worse was that there was at least one section that would take away control from me to pan towards the goal slowly and pan back up slowly after every death. Plus, I think if you put this game in front of a kid who is a bit too young, they'd probably be a bit freaked out by some of the deaths. Baby's first limbo, I guess? The game isn't very long, but it does have a decent amount of replayability. There are these moths that you can complete these side challenges for to unlock, but I got all but one in my first playthrough. The one I didn't get was at the end of the conga line. I decided wasn't worth it. And even though I died at certain sections over and over and over again, I still finished the game in just under 2.5 hours. Would I recommend Oscuro Blossom's Glow? I don't think so. Not when the game is this clunky to play. I'm not even sure who to recommend this to because I think adults will get frustrated with the controls and kids might find the puzzle solutions too complicated if they can get past the yikesy deaths. That being said, it seems I'm very much in the minority. The game has around 20 reviews on Steam since it launched at the time of writing, and it appears I'm the only one to have chosen to give it a negative review. So maybe you'll have more of a fun time than I did. Oscuro Blossom's Glow is $8.79 AUD, and personally, I think that $8.79 is better spent elsewhere.
Disco pop, disco pop, disco pop, disco pop.
Let me start by saying that this game is best played going in as blind as possible. If at any point this game seems up your alley, buy the game and come back to watch this later as a debrief. I'll of course avoid spoilers, but inevitably knowing more about what to expect from the game is going to rob a little bit of the surprise from you. Disco Pup is a game where you play Yuri, a party girl seal who just wants to party in the most popular club in town. Only this club is not letting anyone but the most trendy and stylish dogs. The goal quickly becomes finding the necessary pieces for a disguise to get past a far-sighted bouncer and party the night away. The game runs on a time loop system, where certain actions will cause time to pass on the clock by varying amounts. If it gets to 2 AM, Disco Pub closes for the night and you'll have to try again the next. You'll be talking to the resident weirdo animals, exploring the neighborhood, dumpster diving, and solving key and lock style puzzles by picking up items and finding the right NPC or item to use them on. The game's puzzles can sometimes be a little obscure, but there are multiple disguise combinations that will grant you access to Disco Pub, so you never feel like you're at an absolute dead end. The game also kindly allows you to take certain shortcuts in dialogue if you've interacted with an NPC before. Certain key items are also retained between loops, so major puzzles that might have taken you an entire loop to figure out don't need to be done all over again. The disguise items though are not kept in your inventory. But I like this as it encourages you to go looking for new disguise combinations, particularly if you've already seen one ending. And yes, there are multiple endings. They are more than just getting into the club with a different cosmetic, and they are all worth achieving, either just for the absurdity of what they have to offer, or the satisfaction of how difficult it was to figure out how to get there. Once again, I am being very careful to show what dialogue, areas, and NPCs I show, because the joy in this game comes from the next unpredictable gag or zany character you meet. Just believe me when I tell you that if you don't laugh once during this game, then I'm sorry to tell you that I think you may have lost your sense of humour. Some of it does rely on some media references, but I don't think they're overdone, and when they are used, it does manage to feel cohesive to the game as a whole. There is a healthy dose of eerie moments to occasionally break up the humour, and the game's ultimate ending makes it clear that the game is trying to say something about identity and the freedom that comes from being able to not have to wear a mask to hide who we really are. The game's presentation is also spot on, with the overall design evoking a slightly more grungy Animal Crossing style setting, with UI and music that absolutely complements the late night clubbing vibe. This is the most expensive game I'm reviewing in this video, but I think it's absolutely worth the $14.50 AUD price tag that it has on Steam. If I was to get you to play only one game out of this collection, I think it would be Disco Pup. So that's all folks, that was the 7.5 games I ended up looking at. It took me a long time to edit, as you can probably tell by the fact that I am wearing different clothes, I have stubble, and I figured out how to get my camera to record at full resolution, although the brightness is blown out for some reason. Gotta do some experimentation to figure that out. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. This was a weird new format that I thought I'd give a go. I thought it'd be fun to do some games on a budget. I probably will do another one, just because these ones did take ages to edit though. It either is going to take a long time to come out, or I could potentially get another one in soon, but do less games and therefore takes less time to do, because it takes time to play these games and then record and then edit and then realize I've made mistakes and then need to edit again. It's just, yeah. So we'll see how we go. If you have any suggestions for games, by all means, put them in the comments. If you like this video, let me know. Like the video, just engage with it for the algorithm. I probably will be prioritizing games that are either $15 or less or more recent. I like the idea of making this a gaming on a budget type series, but I also like the idea of it being indie games. So I'm not going to cover any AAA games. I'm not going to cover anything that's at maximum. I'm going to cover games that are $20. Ideally, I want to do $15 or less, but I like that this video actually had mostly $7, not only because it means that it's easier for you to buy these games if you like the look of them, but also just because it's a bit easier on my bank account. I don't have money to be spending $20 willy-nilly here and there on multiple games. Plus, I like the idea of supporting indies over AAA studios. As much as AAA studios do really good work sometimes, it's just nice to spotlight some games that you may not have otherwise heard of. So yeah, if you have any suggestions, let me know. I think at this point this is just word vomit on my part, so I'm going to end it there. I hope you have a lovely evening or day or night or afternoon, whatever time you're watching this. Have a lovely one.